¿Se ocuparon el maletero?
Es el aeropuerto de Guadalajara. Miren qué bonito está quedando. Muy bien. Aquí tienen un hotel Hilton allá adentro, pegado al hotel. Salidas. Estamos aquí en el aeropuerto. Mi papá, mi tía, mi mamá está aquí esperando el vuelo para San José. Está mi mamá, mi tía allá. Aquí estamos esperando abordar el avión a las 4 de la mañana, 4:15. Ahí está mi mamá. Y allá. Tocaron asientos 23 ABCD. ¿Se sienten?
Bien.
No, aquí muy bien. ¿Se sienten bien ya? ¿Listos para regresar?
Ya. Gracias.
Se acabó la...
If you brought on board 2 bags, please remember to place 1 bag up overhead and 1 bag down completely under the seat in front of you. To maximize bin space, your overhead bag should be placed on its side like a book. And on behalf of Alaska Airlines and our OneWorld Airlines partners, welcome on board. Please settle in and enjoy the flight. De parte de la cabina de pilotos les están dando la cordial bienvenida. Una disculpa de antemano por la demora. Están cuadrando los últimos datos para nuestra salida. Tomará unos minutos. Por favor, no se levante de su asiento, abroche su cinturón de seguridad. 3 horas con 54 minutos nuestro tiempo en ruta. Nuevamente, muchas gracias. Recuerden que la política de Alaska, mientras esté sentado, tenga su cinturón puesto. Hay que estar pendientes de la señal de cinturón de seguridad. Cuando esta señal se apague, esté en el panel de arriba, será seguro ponerse de pie. Muchas gracias.
Adiós. Bye bye.
Con los papeles.
Sí, ahorita los alcanzo. Ok. Vamos por 84 por la carretera 84. Vasco. Bonito día. Son los ventiladores para enfriar la carretera cuando hace calor. Tengo boletos a la Sinfónica aquí en San José. No, es que mis papás, bien dormidos, llegó el vuelo a San José como a las 9. Salió de Guadalajara a las 6 de la mañana. Llegó a San José a las 9 de la mañana, 9:30 hora de Estados Unidos. Y pues mi papá y mi mamá bien dormidos. Y yo también ando dormido todavía. No hemos dormido. No dormimos toda la noche. Llegué a la casa, dejé 5 minutos y me quedé dormido. Ya empieza a las 7:30. Ya son las 7:30. A ver si alcanzo a entrar. Pero no, mi papá y mi mamá bien dormidos. Bueno, bye.
you so much. On keys, give it up for Brenda Vaher. And for that amazing trumpet cadenza, Robert Giamburuno. We've investigated many different genres together throughout this amazing Oscar evening. There's a genre of movie composer where he has a genre all unto himself, and that's the amazing composer John Williams. And I count my lucky stars that I've been so honored to have been able to run across John Williams several times in my career. The very first time was when I was in the conducting seminar at Tanglewood, and he came in and talked to us all about the movie business and running with a soundtrack and that whole thing. Fast forward many years, I was at a conference for just a select audience of people when Disney Hall was first opened in LA. And John Williams was the featured speaker. And he's a very modest man, and he told a story on himself all about Schindler's List. You know, lots of times producers and directors will make a rough cut of a movie without even consulting with the composer, and then the composer is invited in later. And so John Williams, and this is him telling the story on himself, he was invited over to Steven Spielberg's house. And he saw the rough cut of the movie, and John Williams was kind of in tears. And he said, you know, this piece is so deep and it's so heavy, I don't know if I'm up to the task. And Steven Spielberg said, yeah, I know, but you're the best we've got. And John Williams told that story on himself. He's such a modest guy. And we are enormously privileged now to present to you the theme from Schindler's List with wonderful concertmaster Isabella Amador. Isabella Amador, everybody. Give her another hand. Before we do the final number on the printed program, I just want to thank the entire crew of the California Theater. They always make us feel so at home here. Front of house, back of house, they're all complete pros. Thank you so much. We want to thank your sonic, spectacular Symphony San Jose. So, to continue with the final story about John Williams, my wife and I once had the amazing opportunity, we had lunch with John Williams and his wife. And this was way back in the previous century, but there were 6 of us. It was at the Oberlin Conservatory of Music, and we had lunch with the dean of the conservatory and her husband, my wife and myself, and John Williams and his wife. And I thought, you know, during this lunch, it would be great if at least once I could come up with some kind of intelligent question, so I didn't look like a total putz. And by the way, I think the only reason he even consented to have us there is he knew I wasn't clawing away trying to get, you know, a job as one of his orchestrators or something. And so I finally came up with a question near the end of the lunch, and I said, Mr. Williams, I imagine when you're looking at the rough cut of a movie, one of your most basic questions is, when should you score it and when should you leave it dry, which means no music. When should you leave it dry? And he looked right at me and went, that's right! And I went, phew. At least it wasn't a stupid question. And then he told the most amazing story, because in the early part of his career, by the way, he used to go by Johnny Williams. Like, all the way back when that TV show Lost in Space was out, that theme was written by Johnny Williams. But even before then, and this is the story that he told us, the careers barely intersected so that he worked on a film with Hitchcock. And Hitchcock was showing him, and you know, Hitchcock was the master of suspense, where something would be building up, and all of a sudden there would be no sound and your brain would just snap. And so he showed John Williams the cut of this movie, and he said to John Williams all of a sudden, and there, you will leave it dry. And so that's me doing an imitation of John Williams doing an imitation of Alfred Hitchcock. But the point is during this luncheon, it was immediately apparent how humble and modest John Williams was. As many movie composers do, he always gave tribute to the wonderful symphonic composers that you hear all the time with your symphony playing. And so as a little demonstration of that, I'm going to lift a little passage out of our Star Wars suite, because the next show you're coming to, you're going to hear this symphony play the planets, right? Right? So check out this little passage from Star Wars. If you have a score in the audience, this is at bar 82. Now, class, did you hear those extremely powerful, strident, wonderfully dissonant chords and those triplet rhythms? Mm-hmm. There's a passage just like that in the same key, with the same triplets, with the same dissonant rhythms. And if anybody can identify, after you hear the planets, if you can identify where that was lifted from, then you should call the office of the Symphony San Jose and identify the passage. And if you're correct, they will give you the opportunity to be the next $20,000 donor to the Symphony San Jose. We need your help again. Listen to how your symphony does this. 438.
No, it doesn't come here.
It's very important that you do a lot of M. Otherwise we hear dum bum 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 ba-dum bum 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 ambo. Observe. Dum bum dum dum da dum da dum da 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 mambo. Then another thing like that is going to happen. You do not say mambo the second time.
That's right.
But then the music will go forward a little bit, and then you will say the second mambo. Here's our little rehearsal. Choir. We don't have time to do this again. You will only say it twice, and I will turn around. So I don't want you to be stressed about this. It's just a direct measure of your worth as a person. Thank you so much. You've been a brilliant audience. We love you. We'll see you next time. Thank you.